our space together to receive more fully, I would just invite you to get really comfortable and settled. Maybe uncross your legs, maybe even open your arms, let them settle onto your lap in an open posture. If you're comfortable, you might want to close your eyes. You can leave them open and maybe even gaze out the window at this beautiful day. And take in with your senses all that is in this moment right now. The quiet that surrounds us in this space that we share together. Outside we have a beautiful sunny day. Spring is right around the corner. We can feel within everything that is in our space and in our reality right now the beginning of new life. Even within each of us, the beginning of possibility. And breathe into that knowledge of new possibility in life within you that you share with everything that is all around us in this day right now. The trees are budding. The early spring bulbs have begun to bloom. The birds are beginning to nest. And find within your heart the possibilities that are beginning to take root in your life right now, the things that are budding inside of you. The things that are beginning to bloom and open inside of you and your life. And acknowledge the oneness that you share with all of creation right now. The beauty and the possibility and the excitement that comes with all of that new life at this beautiful time of year and in this one beautiful day. And as I breathe into that beautiful possibility in that life, there might also be a little bit of nervousness or anxiety or fear as I approach that newness. And so I might even look again to the natural world to see what happens around me in spring. Maybe there's some inspiration there. And I can look to the strength of the trees that year after year go through their cycles of budding and coming into full leaf, shedding leaves, going into the winter of dormancy, and coming back again to this time of spring to bud again. And so it is with us. We go through cycles of change in our lives. And we can know that there is a reason for these cycles, and we can trust that it all happens in fulfillment of a greater purpose, and that there can be comfort in knowing that those cycles are complete and natural, and that there's strength in standing in the cycle wherever it is that we are. birds do the same thing, the bulbs do the same thing. And so whatever it is that you can find to be comforting to you in this time of spring, reach out to that and embrace it in your heart and let it carry you through this beautiful time of opening in your life. Breathe that possibility into your heart of hearts. And let it fulfill and comfort any anxiety or fear that you might also feel. And then even breathing more deeply in, consider all of the people around you here in this community and elsewhere that support and love you and are willing to witness your journey through those seasons of your life. Send gratitude and love out to them. And then we'll come back into this sense of being in this room together to celebrate this day and this moment. And you might gently blink open your eyes and welcome each other with a kind, gentle, and comforting smile. Good morning. I'm so glad to be back here again with you. I was here in the fall, and it was so nice to be invited back. I take that as a good sign. So I'm going to ask whoever's making that little drippy noise if that sound could be turned down or maybe even off. It's almost Easter. And I love that Easter is a time that just happens to coincide with spring because it's a time of possibility. So in the meditation, we explored possibility in nature and inside of us. And it's beautiful that in the Christian tradition, we also celebrate this holiday of Easter as a time of the most amazing transformation of all, right? If that's your faith. So let's explore that a little bit from kind of we'll take it as a story today, as a metaphor, to inspire us through what is a very, very normal part of our human experience, and that is change. I don't know anybody who's not going through change right now. Is there anybody in this room who's not experiencing change? Because I want to talk to you later. Because everybody's going through change. And it used to be that in the coaching and consulting realm, because I do some leadership consulting, and that's my daytime job. I work for General Dynamics with professional leadership development. And it used to be that in the old days, we, and still do sometimes, talk about this thing called the cycle of change as if it were a one-time event. And we're really clean. You know, you started change and you went through the cycle and then you were done. It was really clean and neat. Except that after a while, the experts who talk about this recognize that it's actually not quite that easy because everybody is going through change all the time and we're all in some form of that cycle, and we're usually in various forms of that cycle at all times. So it's a little difficult for people to kind of get their arms around that idea when, I might be at the beginning of the cycle in one part of my life and in the middle of the cycle in another part of my life and at the end of the cycle in another part of my life. So it's really messy. So it's harder to understand it and apply it in a practical way when that's our reality. Even so, it can be useful to look at that cycle and just understand that no matter where you are in the cycle, it still kind of makes sense. So I want to just talk in kind of broad picture aspect about kind of what happens there. And it's probably familiar to most of you, so we're just going to do it as a quick review. So basically what happens is you're going along, and let's pretend that you were stable for a moment. Like that hardly ever happens anymore, but let's just pretend that there was stability in your life. And in some part of your life there probably is stability. That's the point, right? You probably do have a little part of your life that's been stable for a while. Thank goodness, because we need that. Then all of a sudden you're going along and there's change. So what happens is, very normal, very predictable, is there's a reaction to that change. Even if you wanted it, even if it was a planned change and a welcome change. Let's say you wanted to have a baby, for example, right? And you were looking forward to it and it was a joyous event. What happens when that baby's born to those parents, those of you who have children? Chaos, exactly. Your life has changed and it's never the same again, right? Now, eventually you do adapt. But in those first few weeks after that child is born, you don't know what happened to you, right? And there's a whole plethora of experiences that you go through as you adjust to that very welcome and joyous event. And not all of it is positive, right? There's some joy, but there's also some resistance and maybe even some resentment and some grief about what used to be. It used to be, before we had this baby, we could just go out on Saturday, right, and have a good time, and we could just be, grown-ups. And now, well, this could be a couple years before that's a possibility again. Now we have to get a babysitter, and we have to do all these things, and we can't get a good night's sleep, and we're going to have to do all these things, right? It's a reality. So that's an easy example that many of us can relate to. Well, so that's pretty much what happens anytime any change is introduced. And by the way, that was a welcome change. If it was a change that you didn't want, there's a whole lot more that happens, right? Much more resentment, more anger, more resistance, and it could take longer to get through that if it was a change that was put on you that you didn't want, or if it was unexpected. So that's kind of the very quick brief about what happens in change. And then it takes a long time for us to get through back to stability, depending on how resilient we are, how open we are in general, how much we wanted the change, how supported we are, and how much we allow ourselves, and that's really the most important part, how much we allow ourselves to experience all of the range of feelings that came up when the change occurred. Now let's go to the Easter story to really put this into like a real life perspective. So what happens right now in regard to what happened at Easter, right? When we think about the Easter story, right? They're not in Easter yet. Where are they at this point in time? They haven't even come into Jerusalem yet, right? So what's happening with Jesus and the disciples? They're hanging out doing the mission part, right? They're doing the preaching and they're still, but they're more popular now and they're getting more notoriety around the region and people are following and all of these things. But more importantly, what has Jesus done? He's told the disciples what's about to happen, right? He's prophesied about the betrayal, the arrest, and the death and the resurrection. He's told them about it. And in fact, in the Gospel of Luke, 6 times he prophesies about this. Now, I don't know about you, but if somebody, more importantly, somebody I loved more than anybody in the world, these disciples gave up their livelihoods, they left their families, they gave up everything to go and follow Jesus, and they loved him that much. If somebody I loved that much said to me, I'm going to be betrayed and arrested, and I'm going to be killed, I don't know that I'd be casually hanging out and doing let's go preach to mobs and the masses and, I don't know that that's what I'd be doing. I think that I would be calling the security. You can't go out in public. We got to figure out who's going to be betraying you. We got to send out all of the FBI to figure out how this is going to go down because we can't let that happen. Would anybody else be reacting that way? I mean, think about if you knew that your child was going to be betrayed, arrested, killed, and then this whole brought back to life thing, you probably don't even understand what that means, right? There's no way you would let them go back to university after spring break. I mean, you'd be like, no, you're not leaving the house. You're right here. I'm going to be with you every moment of the day. We're putting armored car on everything, right? Think about how we really respond. Those are 2 examples of how we respond when a change is anticipated, right? When something we perceive to be dangerous, because I think the key word here is the disciples really didn't understand what was about to happen. Jesus is trying to tell them, this is an awesome thing that's going to happen. I'm going to rise from the dead. And all of humanity is going to get immortal life through me. They totally didn't get it because they didn't respond in the way that I think I would respond if either one of those things, if I really understood either one of those things. And that's what we do. We either do what I described, we get all anxious about the change, the first part of the change, like if they really believed that he had it right and he was going to be arrested and killed and betrayed, they would have responded with anxiety. We get all protective and freaked out. Or if they had really understood that there was going to be eternal life for real, and there was going to be this amazing thing happen, maybe they would have hurried it along. Hey, well, let's get this betrayal and arrest thing going, right? I want to hurry this up. So, but we often instead, when there's an anticipated change coming, especially if it seems really, really big, we go, I just can't deal with that, so I'm going to pretend that's not going to happen. I'm just going to go about my daily business and, yeah, just pretend. And I kind of think on a human level, that's maybe what the disciples did. They said, okay, I'm just can't handle it. I'm just going to let's just keep doing the preaching thing that we've been doing all along, and we'll just, I'm not listening. So maybe, because they were human. They were human. So there's a quote, I didn't bring my notes up either, that I think kind of applies to some of these things that happened with the disciples and with us. So I just want to share this first one with you. I've got 3. C. Joy Balcy, by the way, she proclaims or claims that she's the most quoted author on Goodreads. I don't know if that's true, but that's her claim. She says, holding on to something that is good for you now may be the very reason why you don't have something better. And I think that in the beginning of an introduced or an anticipated change, we don't get the full picture yet. And so often we experience this resistance, this fear, this overwhelm, even if it's good, and we try really hard to hold on to the old way, or we're struggling with it, right? We're not quite sure yet. We don't have the whole picture, and so we freak out a little bit. We try really it's very human, to hold on for security and for comfort. And so, but that's the very thing that gets in our way of actually releasing the old so that the new can come in. So now let's go back to what happens with Jesus and the disciples. Let's move forward into the future, past, the preparation, all of Easter week and the Palm Sunday and all that, and go to the actual day that the resurrection happens. I find this really interesting too. It was prophesied to them all those times, and yet here we are on the morning of the resurrection, and where are all the men? They were not there, right? They didn't really get it, even though they had been told on the 3rd day I'm going to rise. Now let's check that again. If somebody had told you this amazing miracle is going to happen, I'm going to tell you exactly the day that it's going to occur. And because of that miracle, all of humankind is going to live forever. And here's where it's going to happen, and here's the day. And if you really, really, really believe that, I don't know about you, but I'd be a groupie. I'd be down there hanging out for my biggest rock star fan. I'd be okay. And I'd be yeah, peace out. It's happening today. Come on down, right? And I don't care. If I really believed it, it wouldn't have mattered to me about all the rules about Passover, because it wouldn't matter anymore. That would have been old stuff. And I wouldn't have cared about the danger of whatever, because new life, right? It's the old way's done. It would, if you really, really believed it. Clearly, there was some doubt. And, understandably so, that was a big claim. It was so interesting to me that even when the women came back and said, he rose, he's not there, they're oh, come on. We got to see this. Seriously? Come on, girls. It's those women talking. And so even then, they weren't sure. Don't you find that interesting? They really didn't grasp what had happened. Something transformational had occurred in their lives. Not just in their lives, but if you really believe the story, it was all of humankind. and they weren't able to get it. And I think that's what happens for us too. This story is not only, I mean, you could take it to be however you want in your faith tradition, but if you just take it as a metaphor, it's perfect because it works for us too. And here's why. Because when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to get it. You're in the middle of suffering. For these people, what had happened was their teacher had just been brutally murdered and terribly, oppressed and tortured and badly treated. That was what they were dealing with. And that was a lot. You got to put that in perspective. They were processing the grief of the loss of their beloved teacher and their leader, and politically their leader too. There was a political aspect of what they were trying to accomplish. And now, as far as they were concerned, their whole movement was going to fall apart because their leader had all the charisma and all of the followers, and they were nobody without him. So they were not able to see the fuller picture because they were in that stuck moment of grief, overwhelm, reaction to just that aspect of the change. And that's also what happens to us. We get in the middle of what is truly a transformational experience in our lives. But in the middle of it, it looks like a muddle and a mess. And we feel it that way. We're mourning what we've lost. We're not able to perceive new possibility. We're filled with overwhelm and sadness for what used to be and when we can't see what's going to happen next. It's very important to know that about ourselves and about others too when we're in the middle of change. They needed some time. They really needed that 3 days to be able to just go inward and grieve. So think about that for yourself. Like when you're overwhelmed with large change, right? You can't see that. I know I can't. I usually just beat myself up about stuff. Maybe you do too. Or I start, getting mad with other people. Why'd you do this to me, right? I get all victimized. So I'm thinking the disciples were probably experiencing something like that too. So what can we then think of in terms of that? There's a quote here I think that relates to that too. Barbara Kingsolver says, "The changes we dread most may contain our salvation." Well, hello, wasn't that true for the disciples? Absolutely. And it's true for us as well. The things that we resist the most and we dread the most when we see them coming may actually be the things that totally transform ourselves and our lives so that we can then move on to the people we're really meant to be and the lives we're intended to have. But in the middle of it, oh my gosh, it's so huge and overwhelming, and I can't do it, and how am I ever going to get through this? It's really hard, absolutely. So then what happens? So then the disciples need a little time to process. They run down to see the empty tomb. They start to get a little possibility in there, right? It's wow, maybe, I remember him talking about this. Right? He did sort of mention this thing. Maybe it's true. And now they begin to see the possibility of something else happening, and they're kind of confused about it, right? They're not all of them completely on board yet. What has to happen? Jesus has to actually come, right? And they actually have to meet him again and actually see him in order for that knowledge and that confidence to really cement their full awareness of what has actually taken place. And even then, they don't recognize him right away, right? He has to speak to them to really get that complete connection to be made. And that's true for us too. The new thing that's coming in our lives, we don't always recognize it as, you know what, that's the thing. That's the thing I've been waiting for. That's the thing I've been manifesting. You know all those affirmations I've been saying? Yeah. It's arrived? It looks like that? I didn't realize that. So that's happened to me over and over again in relationships that I was like, you mean that was the relationship I've been manifesting? It didn't look like that in my head. that was the job opportunity or the career path I was supposed to take. That didn't look at all like I thought it was going to. You know, there's a saying in recovery, anybody who's in a 12-step program probably recognize this, that when you're in recovery, you think it's going to look like this, right? And instead it looks like that, right? And eventually you're kind of going in that direction, but it's like all over the map like that. It's like that, right? You don't really, in our heads we think it's going to be so clean and clear. And in reality, we still get there, but by a very different path. And I think the disciples just didn't understand. They didn't understand it at the beginning, what Jesus was really talking about. In the middle, they were filled with their own suffering and their own experience. And even at the end, when he finally shows up, it's like, I still can't quite get it, but I'm starting to. So we need to also escort ourselves through this change process as well. When we understand that we're kind of overwhelmed, we're starting to see the picture, it's beginning to come into focus, but not quite. And then when we finally get it, it's like, wow, this isn't exactly the way I imagined it when you were talking about it, but I'm there now, and I can embrace it. And they fall at his feet, and they worship him, and they see, wow, this is what it means. And by the way, it's not done for them yet. Because you know what it really meant for them? That he dies and is resurrected, and then he is ascended into heaven. Guess what this means in reality for the disciples?
It's up to them now.
It's up to them now. And guess what? Their lives weren't so great after that. Think about that. They all get tortured and killed, and they have to go fling to the far corners of the earth. And I mean, it was not exactly good news, right? So another change for them. They start all over again in the change cycles. And they don't even write really much about that afterwards, about their own personal experiences, about what the reality is of that Jesus comes and does all these amazing things and then leaves. And now, oh, by the way, you have to go spread the word. So it just goes over and over and over again. So I think it's such a beautiful metaphor, because the same thing happens to us. We manifest these amazing things into our lives. We go through that whole change process while we even process that like we outlined. And then guess what? It happens all over again, because we get this amazing new thing in our life, and then we go, oh, now I have to show up as this new person with this new identity, with this new amazing thing in my life, and I don't know how to do that. I've never done this before. It's like I'm starting all over again, and I'm scared because I don't know who I am in this new life, with this new thing, this new relationship, this new reality, and whoa, how do I go do that? So I'm going to leave you with one final quote. Eckhart Tolle, right? Some changes look negative on the surface, but you will soon realize that space is being created in your life for something new to emerge. So I think, friends, that no matter how you want to look at the Easter story, there are many ways, right? But this is one of the real messages of the Easter story, is just like helping us see yet another way what the cycle of change is really all about, and allowing it to inspire us so that we can let go of whatever needs to die in our lives. Something has to die, an attitude, a habit, a relationship that's toxic, or a situation that's toxic. Something has to die so that something new can be born in an amazing way, so that we can become the people that we're meant to be. Thank you.